For now, for more, we turn to law enforcement and security analyst Paul Viollis. Paul, you're looking at this man's background, the shooter here, 9 years in the Army, and he left as a private. What does that tell you?
You know what, Rena, that is going to be the most important point that's been made so far since yesterday. The fact that he went 9 years in the Army Reserve and he left as a private and he was discharged under general conditions, I think it speaks volumes about the fact that he probably had a disciplinary issue while he was in because he left at the rank of private.
Explain to folks who don't understand the way the Army ranks here.
Right. So coming in as a private is a very entry-level position from at that point when you first come into service, especially in the Army. But so you can have, in all branches of service, have different ranks as they go up. Suffice to say, private is the lowest rank. It's the entry rank. In 9 years, based on especially the fact that he did a year overseas, he clearly should have made sergeant rank or greater. But to stay as a private really begs the question, were there disciplinary problems? And how much did the Army actually know about his psychological state?
When you look at the FBI here, they're saying that he's cooperating. What do you think they'll be asking him and looking at now to help the investigation?
Well, the FBI's really got to do this forensically because there's a little bit of egg on the face at this point. I mean, when this guy waltzed into Anchorage and he started making statements that he was hearing voices speak to him. Now, that's one thing. You can turn that over to local PD. But the moment you say, I hear voices speaking to me that ISIS is trying to influence my actions, that goes right to counterterror. So there's a problem right there. Right? There's a clear problem, and that's going to be flushed out. You can guarantee that. But what the FBI and what local law enforcement, Broward County Sheriff's Office is going to do now is they're going to take, through their search warrants, they're going to investigate all the information that they pull from his home, his computers, his phone, etc., any electronic devices, what websites, who he was communicating with, who he met with, and how many people, other people may have known about this particular incident. So the forensic part of this is going to take some time, but that is where it's going to tell us motive and opportunity.
Does it surprise you that law enforcement officials are saying that they haven't ruled out terrorism, even though they say he doesn't have any links necessarily to terrorist organizations?
Right. See, now there's really that kind of ball in the air kind of question. They don't want to say that there's a link to terrorism yet. And of course, law enforcement needs to be extremely prudent and when they announce something like that because they don't want to send a shockwave. But at the end of the day, let's just put it on the table. If somebody says that they're following an ISIS ideology, we're not at war with people. We're not at war with a group. We're at war with an ideology. Like we saw in San Bernardino, like we saw in Orlando. We're seeing this again. Homegrown, Islamic, radicalist trained, and this is what they go to. So we can call it what you want, but if you say that I did this because this is how I felt and was trained and was educated by ISIS, I'm going to have to go with terrorism on that.
We have no indication right now that this shooter was coordinated this attack with anybody else. Lone wolf attacks, so incredibly difficult to try and foil. So how do you get around that?
It's the forensic part. It was really the best question I've had in the last 2 days is the one you opened with, and that is the forensic portion of what people knew. I will tell you, having done this for 37 years now, absolutely, this person, nor does anybody automatically just snap. There are warning signs, there's conversations, there's changes in personal appearance. It's called a violence continuum or behavioral profile. And what that tells people is that there's a dramatic change. Now, this isn't an isolated incident. We saw this, specific examples, we saw this exact same thing in Orlando and how that particular individual, that shooter, was radicalized. So how we prevent this is not at the door, it's not at the airport. How we prevent this is really preemptive education and understanding what we're at war with, what the signs are of people at the genesis of that stage, and how we mitigate it preemptively before it matures into an incident like this.
So you think there should be more awareness and education on mental health issues to help people red flag issues that they might see in other people before this becomes an incident like this?
There has to be. Because again, it's not like when we think kind of like history is nothing but a cause, event, result cycle, right? It always repeats itself. When you look at how we've been at war in our country, you typically could identify who we were at war with. Who are we at war with now? We can't go start bombing the side of a mountain. There's no particular face and there's no uniform. It's an ideology. We have to learn their ideology. We have to learn those signs and preemptively report it. We have 1.2+ million of the best law enforcement officers in the world. There's no question. But we've got to get information early. When you dump something in the bottom of the ninth inning in somebody's lap like that, this is exactly what we have.
Paul Viollis, thank you for joining us, Paul.
Always a pleasure.